If you're ready to explore the Hebrew roots of your Christian faith, then grab your Bible and let's get started. Welcome to Reconcile, the kingdom where we're working towards becoming a harmony of the whole word of truth. My name is Patrice Robertson, and I appreciate you coming by here on today. Well, we discussed a lot last week. We found out that the chapter had additional information in chapter 2 from what was going on in creation in chapter 1. We learned that both male and female, Mr. and Mrs. Adam, which Yehovah called them both, had dominion on earth. We learned the difference between human and animal kingdom. We also identified the first verse in the Bible that discloses Yehovah's name. Now, if you missed out, as always, there's a playlist that you can catch up with us. I hope you have your Bibles with you because we are now in Genesis chapter 3, and today our focus is going to be on verses 1 through 13. And as always, I'm going to jump right into it. This is Genesis chapter 3. Now the serpent was more subtle than any of the beasts of the field which Yehovah Elohim had made. And he said unto the woman, Ye have Elohim said, You should not eat of every tree of the garden. And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but the fruit of the tree was in the midst of the garden. Elohim has said, You should not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, or lest you die. And the serpent said unto the woman, You should not surely die, for Elohim doeth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were open, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. And they heard the voice of Yehovah walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yehovah Elohim amongst the trees of the garden. And Yehovah Elohim called unto Adam and said to him, Where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself. And he said, which is Yehovah, Who told thee that thou wast naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat? And the man said, The woman whom thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. And Yehovah Elohim said unto the woman, What is this thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. Now, we must remember that the serpent was created to be subtle. And you would ask, why do I say that? Just think about this. Job gave us a clue on this. Job chapter 26 verse 13. By his spirit he hath garnished the heavens. His hand hath formed the crooked serpent. So we know that the serpent was created for a reason. Everything is created for a reason. The serpent was by design to be used by Satan. He was used by Satan in order to create that test that was coming to the Adam family. I looked up subtle in the Strongs. Of course I did that. And that's number H6191. To be subtle, to be shrewd, to be crafty, beware, take crafty counsel, and be prudent. Now, we must remember that there are two prudence. There is a negative and positive of prudent. A person with understanding can be prudent, but there's also going to be a prudent that is a crafty, slick person. The question for me that I have that we may not ever get an answer to is why or how did the serpent itself that was created by Yehovah allow Satan to use him? How did that situation happen? You know, he was created by Yehovah Yehovah. So how did he make an agreement? Or does an animal have the capability to say no to Satan? Is that a possibility? Again, we may never get the answer to that until he returns. Then the serpent began to question, or I should say, make Mrs. Adam question herself, question what did Yehovah say to her. And he said to the woman, ye have Elohim said, you should not eat of every tree of the garden? So is he putting the question, is it sure that he said not to eat? And the woman said unto the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but the fruit of the tree was in the midst of the garden. Elohim has said you should not eat of it. And matter of fact, don't touch it, lest you die. For the first time, I heard this from a teacher. Just recently, this is the first time I ever heard this, as that the first lie ever told was by Eve. Well, her name is Mrs. Adam now, was the first person to tell a lie. Now, I question this. How do we know that she is lying? Because we don't know all the commandments. We don't know all the conversations. We don't know all the discussions that Yehovah was having with Mrs. Adam or Mr. Adam, the Adam family, when he was communing with them. So we don't have all the information. And the Bible never tells us that she gave the first lie. Yehovah may have just told her, I can think of this conversation that she's having with Yehovah, and you sure we can't just, and he's like, look, don't even touch it, So that conversation could have happened, So I'm just going to step away from that, and I just do not believe that she lied. I believe what she said, that he even told her, don't even touch it. And the serpent said to the woman, you shall not surely die, for Elohim doeth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be open, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Now, did the serpent who was used by Satan, did he know about grace and mercy? Because the questioning of the timing of the death. Now, some say that Adam did die in the day that he was born. A day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day with the Lord, because Adam died, a little shy of 1,000. He died at the age of 930 years old. So some do consider that in the day that he died. But Satan knew something about grace and mercy, which he was speaking to through the serpent himself. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, the tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also to her husband who was with her. So we do know that Adam was right there while Mrs. Adam was having a conversation with the serpent. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. Now, this is when the test really begun. The lust to be wise, the desire to be wise, that's when the test actually happened, because she ate, nothing happened, and then she handed to her husband, and then he ate. And both their eyes became open when after both of them ate it. But remember what James says. James 1:14-15 says, but each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. Then when lust has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it has run its course, brings forth death. 1 John 2:16 gives us some additional insight. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father. This comes from the world, which is evident when the serpent brings that tree of knowledge of good and evil to her attention. We don't know how long that tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, was not even paid attention to. They was going on with their lives, and here comes the serpent that brings this to her attention. Before we go any further, this is what I want to make sure we understand: that Mr. and Mrs. Adam was communicating. Mrs. Adam was communicating with a serpent. Not Mr. Adam. Mrs. Adam was communicating with the serpent. That she was having a conversation with a serpent. She wasn't startled. She wasn't amazed. The Bible doesn't give us no indication that this couldn't have been possible for an animal to be having a conversation with her. Is this why? Is it possible that communicating with the animals was a normal interaction? Could this be why Adam didn't say anything? Because communicating with the animal was a normal interaction for them to do? However, the problem that I see is that the rulers, Mr. and Mrs. Adam, they had dominion over the animals and the fowls of the air, who had dominion on the earth, was getting counsel from the wrong place. The steps that we're supposed to take is that you have Yehovah, who's bringing information to them, and then they distribute whatever needs to be distributed to the animal kingdom, whatever that needs to be communicated, if needed to be communicated. But this time it was coming from the bottom up, and that's not the way it's supposed to go. Communication comes down from up to down. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. We're not supposed to be getting ungodly counsel. Did she understand that? Don't know. So I have one more thought to think about this, that I want us to think about. What was the name of the fruit? Does the Bible even tell us what type of fruit was on this tree? Is it anywhere in the Bible? I have not read it in the Bible that it was a particular fruit. So it's okay to say we do not know what type of fruit was on this tree. It's okay. So there are so many different ways that this could have went. There's so many different paths that this incident could have ran through. There's so many words that both Mrs. Adam could have said, even Mr. Adam could have said. Both parties could have said different words, different way. This could have went a totally different way. But not only were their eyes open to the knowledge of good and evil, they knew that their nakedness was different. This is a different nakedness, because they knew to cover their bodies when this nakedness happened, because the first time that we heard they were naked, they weren't ashamed about it. And this was back in Genesis chapter 2. They did not need any covering. And they both were naked, and the man and his wife, and they were not ashamed. This was Genesis chapter 2, verses 25. They knew they were naked, not ashamed, not covered. But because they disobeyed and opened their eyes to what is evil, what evilness came in for them to know, what thoughts came in, what came in that caused them to be naked in a different way. This was not the same, because they've already was communicating with Yehovah being naked. And they heard the voice of Yehovah, Elohim, walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yehovah Elohim amongst the trees of the garden. And Yehovah Elohim called unto Adam and said unto him, Where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden. I was afraid, because I was naked and I hid myself. And he said, Who told thee that thou wast naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee not to, thou shouldest not eat? Well, the father came. He came asking questions. He's asking where Adam is. And of course he knew where Adam was, but he came asking questions. But Adam did not realize, by telling Yehovah that he was afraid and he hid himself, he already told off on himself of what he did. Yehovah asked him immediately after he had that after Adam said what he said, Did you eat off that tree? Who told you was naked? So he told off on himself. So he didn't come out pretending that he was naked like before, because sin has showed up. Father saying something very interesting to me. who told you that you were naked? As if not only did you eat of the tree, someone had to tell you that you were naked. Did the serpent tell them they were naked once they bit off the tree? Did the other animals notice and say something? Because, we don't know if they communicated with the animals. We don't know who told them that they were naked, because the Bible doesn't even answer that question of who told them that they were naked. And the man said, the woman who thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. Now this is human nature. After a commandment, after sin entered, this became human nature. The commandment was broken, and human nature automatically became in the state of self-preservation. He wanted Yehovah, the Father, to know that it was his idea. He wanted to know that this is the woman that you gave me that you thought that I needed. So it sounds more of what it could be. It's your fault you gave me this woman. By the way, she told me to just, So basically the blame game. It's her fault. The woman that you gave me, she did this. And Yehovah said unto the woman, what is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, the serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. So she does the same thing to ensure that Yehovah knows it wasn't my idea. I didn't think this up on my own. It came from the serpent. He came here talking about, I was going to be like you. I'm going to know, good and evil. Not knowing whether I should even know good and evil. She should have been content for getting all her knowledge, everything she needed to know, and trusted that Yehovah was going to give her all the information that she needs to know. And because I let my eyes get too big and my desire to overcome me, and I lusted for something that I thought that I needed, I thought that I wanted, and I went for it without consulting with you, Father. How many of us can say today, this is the same thing that I find myself in? Just like Mr. and Mrs. Apple. This is the same war, the same enemy. This is why we have to put our war clothes on. We have to stand. We have to put the belt of truth on our waist. We have to have our breastplate of righteousness. Our feet need to be fitted with the preparation of the gospel of peace. We have to have our shield of faith that will be able to quench the fiery darts that the enemy will throw our way. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, the word of Yehovah. Join me on Thursday. We will be covering the Day of Atonement. And I will see you also on Saturday as we continue our journey through what did Yeshua achieve. As always, man does not live by bread alone, but every word that proceeds out of the mouth of Yehovah. Have a blessed rest of the week, and thank you for joining me.